As August 2025 dawned, Ukraine entered another chapter in a war that has already reshaped Europe's future. What began as a swift invasion turned into a grinding, attritional conflict, one that has redrawn maps, rewritten alliances, and redefined what modern warfare looks like. The month began with renewed missile attacks on major Ukrainian cities. In the early hours of August 2nd, air raid sirens echoed through Kyiv, Odessa, and Kharkiv. Russia launched over 70 drones and cruise missiles in a single night, one of the largest barrages of the summer. Most were intercepted thanks to the expanding network of Patriot and NASAMS systems supplied by Western allies, but several missiles still found their targets. Apartment blocks in Odessa were hit, killing more than a dozen civilians and injuring dozens more. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky called it a night that reminds the world, peace is still far away. At the same time, Ukrainian drones struck deep inside Russian territory, including oil refineries in Belgorod and Kursk. For the first time, local Russian authorities admitted that Ukrainian attacks were disrupting energy supplies, a rare acknowledgement of the growing reach of Kyiv's unmanned operations. The Eastern Front, Donetsk, and the War of Attrition. In the east, the Donetsk region remained the epicenter of fighting. Russian forces pushed toward Pokrovsk, a key logistics hub that stands between them and the remaining Ukrainian defenses along the front. Satellite images and local footage revealed scorched earth, trenches carved into farmland, entire villages reduced to ruins, and columns of armor advancing meter by meter. Ukrainian commanders described the fighting around Klishchivka and Chasiv Yar as apocalyptic. The sound of artillery never stopped. Russian assault units, supported by TOS-1A thermobaric launchers, tried to break through defensive lines that have held since the previous winter. Yet, despite heavy losses, Ukraine's army held its ground. Reports from embedded journalists told of exhausted but determined soldiers, many fighting without rest for weeks. One Ukrainian officer said, "We no longer count the shells we fire. We count the friends we've buried." Russian gains were minimal, but their strategy seemed clear. Grind down Ukraine's manpower and deplete its ammunition reserves. The Southern Front. Shadows over the Dnipro. Further south, in the Zaporizhia and Kherson regions, the war played out differently. Here, drones ruled the skies. Both sides deployed thousands of FPV drones daily, turning once silent farmlands into buzzing battlefields. Ukrainian forces continued to strike across the Dnipro River, targeting Russian radar systems and ammunition depots. A dramatic moment came on August 12th, when explosions rocked a Russian military base near Novokakhovka. Videos shared online showed massive fireballs lighting up the night. The result, Ukrainian intelligence later confirmed, of a precision drone strike that hit a warehouse storing guided bombs. In response, Russian artillery unleashed heavy shelling on Kherson City, damaging residential blocks and killing several civilians. The Ukrainian mayor described it as punishment for our resistance. Yet, despite the destruction, morale in southern Ukraine remained defiant. Volunteer groups continued to evacuate civilians, repair power lines, and deliver aid under constant threat of shelling. The Northern Front and cross-border attacks. Meanwhile, in the north, cross-border raids continued to unsettle Russian territory. The Freedom of Russia Legion, an anti-Kremlin unit fighting alongside Ukraine, launched a surprise attack across the border into the Belgorod region. Although their incursion was small, it sent a strong message that Russia's own border was no longer untouchable. For several nights, Russian air defense systems fired relentlessly into the sky, trying to stop waves of Ukrainian drones heading for oil facilities and communication hubs. The attacks underscored a growing reality. Ukraine had turned the tables in drone warfare. Western analysts called it a war of innovation, where artificial intelligence, satellite-guided drones, and real-time battlefield data were redefining what an underdog nation could achieve. The technology. War. Drones, AI, and the new battlefield. By mid-August, both Ukraine and Russia had lost tens of thousands of drones, yet each week new models appeared on the battlefield. Ukraine's use of AI-assisted targeting allowed small teams of operators to control multiple drones at once, striking tanks, artillery, and even soldiers in trenches. Russia, meanwhile, adapted with jamming systems and electronic warfare equipment, attempting to blind Ukrainian drones. The battlefield had become a laboratory for future warfare, where innovation determined survival as much as courage. Footage from Ukrainian drone operators showed precise hits on Russian supply trucks and observation posts. But these victories came with heavy losses. For every successful strike, countless drones were destroyed by countermeasures. Still, the psychological effect was enormous. Russian soldiers described the constant buzzing of drones as a sound from hell. Political and international developments. Diplomatically, August 2025 saw major movement on the world stage. The European Union announced a new sanctions package targeting Russian technology imports and defense suppliers. Meanwhile, the United States confirmed an additional $3.4 billion military aid package, including long-range ATACMS missiles and more air defense units. In Brussels, NATO leaders met to discuss a long-term defense agreement for Ukraine, effectively a bridge to eventual NATO membership. While full accession remains uncertain, several member states began training Ukrainian pilots on F-16 fighter jets, expected to arrive before the end of the year. Russia responded with sharp rhetoric. The Kremlin accused the West of provoking escalation and warned that deploying F-16 would make Western air bases legitimate targets. Despite the threats, Western support continued to flow. The human cost. Beyond the headlines and strategies, the human cost of this war remains staggering. The United Nations reported that more than 9 million Ukrainians have been displaced since 2022, with nearly 1.3 million still living as refugees across Europe. Inside Ukraine, power grids and water systems damaged by Russian strikes were being rebuilt again and again. In frontline towns like Avdiivka and Kupiansk, residents live underground or in half-collapsed buildings. Humanitarian aid convoys risk constant shell fire. In hospitals across Ukraine, doctors face shortages of medicine, blood supplies, and equipment. Yet stories of resilience continue to emerge. Teachers holding classes in bomb shelters, engineers restoring power lines within hours of attacks, and volunteers delivering food by bicycle to elderly residents who refuse to leave their homes. One image that went viral in mid-August captured the spirit of this endurance. A young boy in Kharkiv riding a scooter through a cratered street, smiling as if the war didn't exist. The information front. In August, the war for truth was as fierce as the war for territory. Both sides flooded social media with images, drone footage, and propaganda. Russia claimed victories in the east that Ukraine denied. Ukraine released videos of destroyed Russian convoys that Moscow dismissed as fakes. Cyber warfare intensified as well. Several Ukrainian government websites faced coordinated hacking attempts traced to Russian-linked groups. In response, Ukrainian cyber teams struck back, targeting propaganda outlets and disrupting Russian logistics platforms. The war for global perception remained crucial. As fatigue grew in Western nations, Ukraine's leaders worked tirelessly to remind the world what's at stake. Not just Ukrainian freedom, but the principle that borders cannot be changed by force. Inside Russia, a shifting reality. Inside Russia, the atmosphere in August was tense. The Kremlin continued to project confidence, but independent reports painted a different picture. Casualties were mounting, and recruitment drives grew more desperate. Posters in provincial towns offered high bonuses for military service, and new laws tightened control over dissent. Yet signs of unrest persisted. Small protests erupted in several cities after reports of rising taxes and inflation. Some Russian soldiers returning from the front posted anonymous videos criticizing commanders and conditions. Though heavily censored, these glimpses revealed cracks in the narrative of unity Moscow had tried to maintain. Looking ahead, the coming autumn offensive. As August came to a close, both Ukraine and Russia appeared to be preparing for what many analysts called the battle for endurance. Ukrainian commanders hinted at a new wave of counterattacks once additional Western weapons arrived, while Russian forces dug in for the long haul, building layered defenses across the south and east. The question looming over both sides was no longer who would win, but how long they could fight. Energy shortages, ammunition limits, and exhaustion haunted the front lines. Yet morale among Ukrainian troops remained remarkably strong. "We've been through worse," said one soldier near Donetsk. "They thought we'd fall in a week. It's been 3 years, and we're still here." Conclusion: a war that defines an era. As August 2025 ended, Ukraine stood battered but unbroken. Its cities scarred, its economy strained, but its spirit intact. Russia held vast territories but faced growing costs, economic, military, and moral. The world watched, weary but alert, knowing that the outcome of this war would define the balance of power for decades to come. In a world of shifting alliances and uncertain futures, the war in Ukraine remains a test, not just of nations, but of humanity's will to resist aggression. In the end, it's not the size of armies that decides history, but the endurance of those who refuse to surrender. And in the fires of August 2025, Ukraine's endurance still burns bright.